So welcome. This is officially day one of our trip, although we set off last night around 8 o'clock from Dubai. We managed to get across the Dubai UAE border with Oman. The plan was to cross the border in the evening when it's quietest, and also make up some kilometers towards the Saudi border. So today the plan is to cross from Oman into Saudi, and then a few kilometers along that road we will start the off-road section, which is about 700 kilometers into and out of the empty quarter, a very remote area. Last night was extremely wet, hence I'm sleeping in the car today. You can see this is my hotel room, and it's pretty good actually. I set it up where I put everything into the boot area of the car, and I put the front seats forward. I've got like jerry cans and things here, which has actually been quite a good support. And I'm in this really warm kind of, I bought this in Saudi Arabia actually, this kind of Bedouin sleeping bag. It's extremely warm and comfortable, and it's actually not bad at all. I tell you, I'd rather be in here than outside. Last night it was gale force winds with rain. I was actually a little bit worried because we've come along a wadi area. It's all flat, but there's a kind of areas of this flat where the water travels, and I was a little bit worried that our route back to the road, because we've come about 5 kilometers from the road, would be impassable. But looking outside, it looks okay actually, and the wadi there is just in front of the car where that sand bit is. There's a bit of a drop, and I thought that would be just the amount of rain that was coming down yesterday. I thought that would be a river in the morning. We parked up as high as we could on this flat here. You just see the telegraph poles, or pylons rather, in the distance. They're heading towards the road, but we've made up very good time today. We've done some good kilometers. I think it's probably only another hour and a half to the Saudi border, and that will give us a good start on the off-road section, because we're trying to essentially do a 4-day trip in 3 days. So just those 4 hours of driving last night has made up a good half day. And then the off-road section, which is a big unknown to me. I've driven all over Saudi Arabia. I know Saudi Arabia very well. The empty quarter section I haven't driven in before. I've plotted a route which looks doable. We're going to be carrying quite a lot of fuel combined, I think, in my car, so that's the fuel tank and jerry cans. I'm carrying 240 litres of fuel, so in total, so I've got 4 jerry cans of 20 litres each. That's 80 litres of fuel carrying, and I just hope that's going to be enough. I think it is going to be enough. My calculations are literally I'm 40 litres over as just a precaution, but you'd never know. When you're driving off-road, your range could be 300-400 kilometers if it's tough going in an FJ, or it could be 500 or 600 kilometers. I normally average around 500 kilometers off-road per tank, 500 to 600 kilometers off-road per tank, and the off-road section is 700 kilometers, so I'm carrying 80 liters of fuel, which should easily get me back to the road. And we will see how it goes, but it's really nice to come on these trips, especially when you're exploring different areas where you haven't driven before, areas of unknown. And you can only do this trip in the winter, so I'm not complaining about the rain and the cold at all, because this trip is not possible in the summer. The temperatures in the desert are just too high, and we're so deep into that. I mean, we are 350 to 400 kilometers deep inside the empty quarter. There is nothing there. This is an area which has only been explored within the last 50-60 years. So it's extremely remote. There's obviously activity in the desert areas now because of the discovery of fuel, petrol, and oil, but yeah, it's still we'll still be driving in areas where people just don't drive. It is just so remote. So our camp spot was around 140 kilometers to the Saudi Arabian Oman border, and that took us just under 2 hours to reach. At the border, it was relatively straightforward to pass, although we did face one issue. As we had entered Oman and were leaving Oman within 24 hours, the systems at the border didn't recognize that we had entered the country. So we did have to wait around 30 to 40 minutes for them to confirm with the border, the Oman border that we entered, the UAE Oman border that we entered, that we had entered Oman. And then after that, we were able to pass. Once we cleared customs, we filled up with petrol. There is a petrol station just as you exit the immigration site itself. The petrol station feels like it's a temporary petrol station. At the time of filming this, the border had newly been opened to travellers. So we filled up here with petrol for our journey, as we would be entering the off-road section a few kilometres from the border itself. So
I need to pay first, or?
It's time to fill up all of our fuel canisters. You can see here, filling up these fuel canisters.
Auto stop, right?
80 litres plus 160 litres in the car. So it's 240. Hopefully it gets us there and back. So as I was filling up, I was thinking about where to carry the fuel. There's quite a lot of fuel that I was carrying, 80 litres of 4 jerry cans. And I did consider putting the fuel jerry cans on the top of the car, on the roof rack. But I decided against that just because I wasn't familiar with the terrain that we were going to be travelling through. I didn't know how aggressive the drive would be, and I wanted to keep the weight as low as possible. So I ended up putting them behind the front seats and jamming them between the front and the back seats. 2 jerry cans on each side, and that seemed to work. The only mistake I did make actually in filling up the car and the jerry cans was I brimmed the jerry cans to the top, and that was a mistake because one of them was leaking slightly, and even when I went to fill up the car, because the jerry cans were complete to the top, there was spillage as I was trying to angle the fuel tanks to fill up the car. So what I would suggest is, if you do use jerry cans, not to fill them up right up to the top. I think I was just concerned about not having enough fuel, so was trying to put in as much fuel as possible. From the petrol station, we travelled just a couple of kilometres before entering the desert. On our route, the rain started to come down again, and I must admit I was quite concerned because it could really impede our trail through the desert. Now, the first part of the route was on established tracks, which were fine, but I knew that as we got deeper into the desert, we would be crossing huge sabkas, so huge salt flats, which, if wet, would be impassable. So it was a bit of a tentative moment for me coming along the trail, knowing that we had hundreds of kilometers of desert to go, and we were going to be dropping down into sabkas which could potentially be completely waterlogged. And the challenge that we had was on this particular route that I had plotted, where there weren't many exit points. There were some parts where we would not be able to double back on ourselves because we were dropping down huge dunes. So this was a concern in case we came to a sabka area where it was impassable. But the beauty of the route that I had planned, where we were making or utilizing existing tracks, so there were large sections of the route which utilized old tracks which were used during the exploration of oil, I can imagine. But these were, even though these tracks were there, these were old tracks which had been consumed by the desert, so large parts of them had dunes crossing them. But as we got deeper and deeper into the desert, we then needed to plot our own routes. The tracks became less prominent, and we then started to drive freestyle across the dunes. Now the dunes were quite damp, so this is a double-edged sword really, because it makes driving on the dunes much easier, but you can't reduce your pressures of your tyres too much through fear of a pop out or tyre coming off the rim. So whilst it did definitely make the progress through the huge dunes, getting up and down them, much easier, there were still risks of pop out, and we still were contending with very wet sabkas. Well, so welcome to the trail.
What's up?
You guys are too fast. We are crossing these sabkas here, and they are just too soft. The ground is just too damp. So we're going to try and come down pressure a bit more, because I think we are a little high. We're at 25, and we're going to see what's what. So I load the tyre pressure from 25 to 15 psi, and I noticed the difference immediately. Much more traction due to the larger footprint of the tyre in the sabka. The other thing that we did was I asked the other drivers behind to drive in the same tracks. So the reason for this is that they are driving over compacted sand by my car, and they're not spinning so much, creating their own tracks. So we drove along the same tracks and also advised them to take a bit more distance just in case I hit a wet patch. This was the biggest concern because these Sabcas are huge, and if I run into a wet patch, at least it will give the cars behind me time to respond, maybe take a different line or exit the Sabca. Recovery from a Sabca is very difficult. We only had 4 cars with us. We were in extremely remote area, so that was my biggest concern at this point. By the end of day 2, we covered around 150 kilometers and set up camp just before sunset. During the night, the thunder we could hear in the distance was causing some concern because the ground was already saturated and any more rain would make it impassable. However, that morning it was bright and sunny. We're about halfway to the lakes now. It's probably another 100 kilometers to go. But the problem that we've had on this trip, and it was always going to be the area of concern, is fuel. We're going so deep into the empty quarter in Saudi Arabia and covering so much ground that we will need to be self-sufficient off the cars for minimum 3 days. And the problem is fuel. I'm carrying 240 litres in total, so that's 160 in a car and I'm carrying 80. And that was planning to get to the lakes and out, so that's a 700 kilometre trip, and I can do probably about 500 to 600 kilometres off-road, so the 80 litres was to get us out plus a margin of around 20%. And the problem is we're burning into that 20%. On the areas we felt the driving, what I felt the driving was going to be easier on, like on these wide open Sabcas, it's actually burning more fuel than going through the dunes themselves. They're drenched. It was raining all day yesterday, and we're having to go. Some of them we're cutting across, and it is actually a risk cutting across these Sabcas because recovery from a Sabca it's a nightmare. You can't get 2 cars out there because the other car will sink. It was definitely a risk because normally I would go and check out whether there's enough traction in the Sabca or if it's too soft. But the problem was it's so big, so we all going through, we kept the gaps. But towards the middle of the Sabca it became extremely soft, and I think I was hitting the limiter in one of the lowest gear, just praying that the car doesn't come to a stop, because if you lose traction in a Sabca you will not go. They're just too soft in the middle. We just about made it through, which was awesome, but a bit of a wake-up call for me actually to not take those kind of risks. If we get to the lakes, I've been told the track out, the Keedon Trail out, is a lot easier. It's a trail that they used for oil fields exploration, and I've heard that is actually a firm track in places. So if we get to the lakes, then I think there's another 100 kilometres through Sabcas and dunes, and then the Keedon Trail, which is going to be going north up to Shubaita. That will be around 170 kilometres, if not 200 kilometres. Yeah, and then we're out, but we'll see how today goes. The good thing is the sun's out and it's not raining anymore, so we should be able to make some good progress and try and conserve that fuel. Now I took 240 litres. I'll tell you when we get out whether that was the right call or not. At the moment it feels like it would just be enough, and maybe we needed to take a little bit more. And some of the other cars, we have Nissan Patrol with us, that's burning even more fuel. So yeah, this one's going to be interesting. And the problem is that we can't turn back. We going back will burn more fuel. Those Sabcas were extremely soft and wet, and some of the dunes to get over were coming down stuff, so getting back won't be an option for us. the only way is forward. And the way forward was even more difficult on day 2 than day 1. Those huge thunderstorms that we saw from our camp, we were heading directly into that area. The Sabkas were no longer passable at all. We were skirting around the edges to maintain traction and burning even more fuel. I'm getting a bit worried about fuel. I'm currently on half a tank. I have 80 litres of fuel in the jerry cans, which is another half tank on this. But the plan was to get to the lakes and use half a tank only, because it's like half a tank will take me about 80 litres to get from the lakes out to about 300 kilometres. But the problem, what we're finding is we're running over Sabkas, and there's been recent rains, and it was raining yesterday heavily, and the problem is it's burning our fuel. It's going through the fuel. We're spinning up the tyres. We're having to sometimes come round these massive Sabkas, which is burning the fuel. And if I'm on half a tank, I don't know what the other guys are on, because I'm driving in eco mode. You're having to actually power through the Sabka because the wheels are just spinning. So I'm not sure if we will have enough to get out. If we get to the lake soon, what is it? It's still like over 100 kilometers to the lakes. We're gonna have to see what everyone's fuel levels are, because if the Sabkas get better, if they're much further, I mean, you can see outside the window all this white crust. The problem is that when you go through this white crust, it's all mud, like soft sand underneath, and it's just like quicksand. So you break through that crust and you're stopping. That's why we're powering through. We're doing like 100 kilometers an hour trying to cross these dunes with cars revving, just trying to get out. But yeah, that's the problem. I've not told the guys yet because I don't want them to worry. But what we might need to do is save some of our fuel. I mean, I'll run mine until it gets to empty before putting any fuel into my car, because worst case scenario, at least one car can go out, get to the petrol station, and then try and drive back. The Keedon Trout sounds like it's easier than this what we've come through. Especially the latter part of the Keedon Trail, it's a very well-established track. But at the moment, it's going to be close. It's going to be really close on fuel, and I don't want the guys to worry. But when we stop off at the camp, I think I'm going to tell them not to put in fuel until we need it in the car, because I'd rather save as much fuel as possible for us to be able to, at least 1 or 2 cars to get out, fill up the jerry cans and come back and help everybody, and fill up their cars and come back and help everybody else. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, I received a radio message to return to the back of the convoy as one of the cars had a mechanical issue. So what's happening here, just put these on because the sun's in my eye, is we're coming round this Sabka because it's so soft in the middle, and
I have
CJ's car,
if it's easier.
she has these protruding dust cups which are like bullets. What's happened? Is this it?
This is the plastic one that normal.
It's what she should have.
Yes.
So these are the normal dust caps you get.
She has.
She has ones which come out, which look really cool, but what's happened is in the Sabca, the top layer is so crusty, underneath it's so wet, her tyre is spinning,
I have a,
and this, they're like bullets. It must have caught the top of the bullet dust cap and snapped the valve. So don't put bullet dust caps on your car, because it protruded so out it just snapped the valve off. The issue that we have is we have 3 Toyotas which have the same stud pattern, and you can swap the tyres and wheels between these cars, but only one Nissan. So this is her spare, and we still have 150 kilometers to the lakes, and then from the lakes we have 300 kilometers out. So it's a risk that we don't have a spare tyre now on this car. We just need to be extremely careful. But it's all part of the journey. So it's inevitable that issues are going to happen during such expeditions, and what's important is surrounding yourself with the right people. And that doesn't mean just the driving ability or technical knowledge about cars, but also the right attitude. And I weigh attitude much higher than any driving ability or technical ability that someone has when I'm making these expeditions. And I'm always very careful about who I'm traveling with in such situations. You need to be with people who are not gonna freak out. I mean, this situation, it was very, very easy to get worried. We were 250 kilometers deep in the desert. We still had another 150 kilometers to get to these lakes. There was no phone reception for 2 days of this trail. And, you know, we could have had people who just freak out when issues happen, but everyone remained calm. People just got on with trying to fix the problem, and that's the great thing. You learn a lot about people when you travel with them. And for this kind of expedition, I'm really pleased we had the right crew with us, and we fixed the problem in no time and continued on our journey towards the lakes. Throughout the day, the sand started to dry out, and the larger Sabcas were much easier to pass. The top layer was completely dry now, so we made great progress towards the lakes. Also, there were more Sabcas. The closer to the lakes that we got, the wider the Sabcas are, so we were able to make extremely good progress cutting across these huge Sabcas. The closer we got to the desert lakes, the more trails and established tracks we picked up. Now, some of these are old oil field exploration trails, but some of these are maintained and still used by border guards. The Oman border lies just 15 kilometers from the lakes, and as we did not wish to enter a restricted area, we did not travel any closer to the Oman border. Upon reaching the lakes, I was filled with mixed emotions. This was a journey that I had been wanting to do for many years. Many years of hearing about these mysterious lakes in the middle of the empty quarter, stories of previous explorations by Wilfred Fessinger crossing the empty quarter, and just the sheer beauty of it. It was incredible. It looked like a mirage, the dark blue water with the light golden sand rising above it. It just looked surreal. I was also filled with relief that we had made it with no major incidents happening along the way. There was just one thing left to do: go for a swim. The water was refreshingly cool. It was amazing to swim in this lake in the middle of the desert, and the water itself was less sulfuric than I had imagined. I'm not sure if it's because of the recent rains, but it certainly felt drinkable to me. It's just incredible. The empty quarter in Saudi Arabia. Huge, huge lake. And the thing is, we're like 300 kilometers from the nearest road, deep in the empty quarter. It's just awesome. So we stayed at the lakes for a few hours, enjoying the scenery and having a bite to eat. And then we decided not to camp at the lake, but further north. There was one other area I wanted to explore before we exited the empty quarter desert. So in planning for this trip, I had seen on Google Maps what appears to be a volcano, and I wanted to check this out as it was on our route out of the empty quarter desert before we left. So we decided to camp closer towards the volcano so we could explore that area before exiting the empty quarter desert. We took the Keaton Trail from the lakes. Now the Keaton Trail is a 360 kilometer trail that leads from the lakes up towards Shubaita, and it's in pretty good condition. Most of it is very well maintained and quite hard. In fact, we could switch into two-wheel drive on most of it because we wanted to save some fuel to see the volcano as well, so we were in two-wheel drive on the very firm parts. But it is an amazing trail through the empty quarter desert, and as I say, most of it is very well established. There are parts which are sandy, so it does require four-wheel drive, but for the most part we were in two-wheel drive to conserve fuel. Well, this is day 3 of the Saudi empty quarter desert lakes trip. It's been an incredible couple of days. We've travelled very deep into the empty quarter. We're probably about 400 kilometers deep now. The whole off-road section is going to be 700 kilometers. This place, the dunes are just massive. They are giants. They are literally giants. I've never seen dunes higher than this, and we've never been as remote as this. I mean, we are extremely remote. 700 kilometers off-road through this. So what we're doing is coming up on the dunes and going back into the subcos and taking the subcos and then crossing them, and some of these are just monster of dunes. I'm ready to go.
Finally.
From our campsite on day 3, the desert volcano was around 150 kilometers northwest. We took the Keaton Trail up most of it, and then as soon as we were parallel, we cut into the dunes to get to the desert volcano. The dunes in this area of the empty quarter are amongst the largest dunes I have ever seen. It was staggering to see the height, and just the sheer beauty of them was amazing. Oh my god, this dune! Woo! It's unbelievable. In addition to the spectacular dunes that we were driving through, we were also treated with amazing views of lakes that had formed as part of the recent rain. As we travelled north along the Keedon Trail, signs of life began to appear. We saw cars and trucks that were servicing camel farms in the northern part of the Empty Quarter Desert. On our route north, a camel farmer invited us in for camel's milk and to see his flock, including a newly born baby calf.
نعم خبرهم كلها توهم والد أمس.
Okay.
مع بيبي صغير.
يعني تبعد منها ليس تقرب. He said because it's newborn, don't go close to it though.
Don't go close.
Okay.
علشان بتكون أنا بس عشان تصورون.
Yeah, صور فقط.
علشان ترتاحون.
بارك الله فيك. بارك الله فيك. It never ceases to amaze me, the kindness and generosity of the people of the Middle East, and especially the desert, a people with so little in terms of material belongings are willing to give so much to complete strangers and invite them to their home and feed them and give them camel's milk and spend time with them. I just wish people outside of the Middle East could see this. It's so beautiful.
Long legs. Born with longer legs.
Just born there, you can see the afterbirth. From the camel farm, we headed east towards the desert volcano, which lies around an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours from the Keedon Trail. The dunes in this area are very different from the dunes in the southern part of the Empty Quarter Desert. These were much smaller dunes but more compact, and we were driving against the dunes, which made going a bit slower than normal. The other thing that slowed us down was we didn't deflate our tyres after entering the dunes from the Keedon Trail. On the Keedon Trail we had inflated our tyres to 25. We didn't need lower tyre pressure than that, and the higher tyre pressure would save a bit of fuel along the Keedon Trail. Now, whilst the dunes weren't too difficult to drive through, we were driving through at a much higher tyre pressure, and despite the sand still being a little damp in places, the sand actually was much softer than the sand that we were driving through in the southern part of the Empty Quarter. And together with the higher tyre pressure, going against the dunes, dropping down quite small technical dunes, there were a couple of recoveries that we needed to do before reaching the desert volcano. We're very high in pressure.
Yeah.
And this kind of, it's like on a knife edge. Some of it is like, take exactly the same as me because there's a hole.
Yeah, I know. I did yesterday.
There are holes here. And our pressures are very high.
You can make it through that gap.
That's the way we do it. Yeah! Your wife is a great driver.
Yes, it is.
This recovery was actually once we reached the desert volcano. I think it's just a combination of high tyre pressure, weight that we were carrying on the vehicles, that just made it a bit trickier than normal.
You might deflate, maybe.
Yeah, it didn't look like he was moving much. The wet sand had actually made this
Max tracks right here would help.
much trickier to recover from.
Yeah, you're not doing anything now.
But recovery wasn't an issue. he had a winch with a very long cable, and it was pretty straightforward to winch him off of this area. In fact, the winch was the best thing in this situation because it was controlled. It was very slow. The sand was still damp underneath, which can be quite hazardous when you're recovering a car sideways, especially off a crest. And with the winch, it's just much more controlled, and it was pretty easy once we got him pointing in the right way. So the desert volcano, well, it's quite a small volcano in the grand scheme of things. I've seen much larger ones, although I've never seen a volcano in a sand desert like this. I don't think it's a volcano. The stones around the area didn't appear to be volcanic. Now, some of the team with me felt that this was a man-made structure, that it wasn't natural. I don't know is the answer. It is in a perfect circle. There were tracks going up and onto it, so I drove up and onto it, but it's in the middle of nowhere. There are no tracks coming to this area, but there were tracks in this area. I don't know. I don't know whether it was a man-made structure or something that had just appeared as a geological event. I don't know, meteorite maybe, but the stones they weren't volcanic, so I don't think this is a volcano. Could it be a meteorite strike? Possibly. The top of it is in a perfect circle and it's quite compact. I don't know. I don't know whether it is a man-made structure or not. If you do, write in the comment section. The route back to the Keaton Trail was much easier than our route to the desert volcano. We were now going with the dunes, managed to also pick up a better line towards the Keaton Trail, and in no time we were back on the trail and heading towards Shubaita. And that was it. We got to Shubaita, inflated our tyres and headed towards the petrol station to refuel. What an amazing trip. One of the best desert expeditions I have ever been on. Well, that's it. I hope you enjoyed the video and I look forward to seeing you on the next one.